Now that's a twist. NATO enters Ukraine, Europe puts pressure on the Kremlin, and the bunker dweller invites Zelensky to Moscow. Trump once again plays into the Kremlin's hands. After a tough conversation with the coalition of the willing, he appeared with dictator Putin. Macron, Rutte, and von der Leyen promised new pressure on Russia. Europe is showing its teeth. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Welcome, this is Ukraine Today. I'm Victoria Panchenko. And now, the latest event. 30,000 foreign soldiers for Ukraine, 20 minutes of Witkoff's presence, and a steel porcupine from Ursula von der Leyen. In Paris, the meeting of the coalition of the willing on security guarantees for Ukraine has concluded. It should be noted that not everyone present agreed to contribute to Ukraine's security, not only with political support, but also with concrete commitments. However, there are still some positive results for Ukraine. So, political decisions have been made. What will the next steps be? Let's start with EU membership. This is a separate point in the security guarantees. According to Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, this gives Ukraine economic, political, and geopolitical security guarantees. Zelensky also stated that the armed forces of partner countries will still be present in Ukraine as part of the security guarantees. The president of Ukraine added that the main guarantee of lasting peace is a strong Ukrainian army. Moreover, Zelensky announced a new format for air defense. However, we are waiting for a signal from the United States.
As for air defense, we are considering one format. Yesterday, for the first time, we discussed this format with Emmanuel. Today, we shared it with our partners and President Trump. If we receive a positive signal from the United States, we will be happy to share the information with President Trump as well.
According to the results of the meeting in Paris, 26 countries are ready to provide Ukraine with deterrence forces after the end of the war. By the way, sources from Radio Liberty reported that, according to preliminary data, the European mission in Ukraine could number 25,000 to 30,000 military personnel, although these figures may change. The president of France clarified that some of these participants in the coalition of the willing may send a contingent, while others may provide resources to ensure Ukraine's security in the air or at sea.
Today there are 35 of us at this table. These are the ones who responded to Russian aggression. And these are the ones who today want a just and lasting peace. Only Russia chose war in 2022, just as it did in 2008 in Georgia and in 2014 in Crimea and Donbass. We do not know the exact losses in this war, but we do know that Russia has lost more than 1 million soldiers killed or wounded in its attempts to capture less than 1% of Ukraine's territory since November 2022. We are ready. Today, this coalition of the willing has presented and clarified with military and political commitments the contributions of 35 members to ensure those guarantees of peace and security for Ukraine. This first goal is to ensure that the negotiations do not impose any restrictions on the size or capabilities of the Ukrainian army.
However, the deployment of peacekeepers is not being discussed at this time. The conversation is about instructors who will not participate in combat operations. This was stated by Roman Goncharenko, a commentator for Deutsche Welle. We
constantly talk to you and use the term security guarantees. German experts say that this term is actually not quite appropriate, since security guarantees is a very strong phrase. They believe that such guarantees can only be provided by NATO, and since NATO is not being discussed at the moment, it would be more accurate to talk about some kind of support.
The US has expressed its readiness to be part of the security guarantees. Emmanuel Macron also stated that the details of organizing deterrence forces will not be disclosed so as not to reveal all the cards to Russia.
This is our line of defense and Ukraine's line of defense. But we have military planning. This is not just a declaration, it is reliable planning. Some of them will deploy troops on the ground in Ukraine, while others will remain in NATO member countries, opening access to their bases. I will not specify who promised what.
The coalition will continue to put pressure on Russia. The development of military plans regarding Ukraine has been completed, said Dutch Prime Minister Dick Schoof.
Today, an important step was taken because the development of military plans has been completed. And today there was a political commitment from everyone to provide these security guarantees. Secondly, it was once again emphasized that it is extremely important to continue putting pressure on Russia. And that, in the meantime, we continue to provide comprehensive support to Ukraine. Because the best security guarantee is a strong Ukrainian army, there was also a discussion with President Trump regarding security guarantees and pressure on Russia, and it was decided that we will continue to develop this further, and that support from America truly exists.
President Macron of France also noted the pressure on the Russian Federation from both the EU and the US. He emphasized that there should be a meeting at the level of the two presidents, followed by trilateral and quadrilateral meetings.
We are all sending a signal that now all these signals must turn into reality. What was agreed upon 2 weeks ago? A meeting at the level of the two presidents, then a trilateral meeting and a quadrilateral meeting. If Russia continues to refuse concrete peace negotiations, then together with America we will impose additional sanctions and give a clear response to this refusal by Russia. And
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni at the summit once again firmly stated that Rome does not wish to send its own troops to Ukraine, but is ready to support monitoring of the ceasefire and training missions on the territory of European allies. Poland and Romania also do not plan to send their troops to Ukraine, even as part of security guarantees after a possible ceasefire. At the same time, Bucharest is ready to join peacekeeping operations and stabilization missions, while Warsaw is prepared to provide logistical and other support without directly involving its armed forces in the conflict zone. Notably, the phone conversation between Trump and the European leaders took place in a tense atmosphere, according to Bild. According to the publication, the American president accused European countries of buying Russian oil, thereby helping the Russian war machine. The European leaders tried to coordinate joint actions with Trump and proposed to send a delegation to Washington within 48 hours to create a working group that would develop a new package of sanctions. It is still unknown whether the head of the White House agreed to this proposal. Bild also adds that among supporters of aid to Ukraine, dissatisfaction and disappointment with Trump are growing. Moreover, after the phone conversation with European leaders, Trump published a photo with the Russian dictator. In the picture, you can see them watching a B-2 Spirit bomber and F-35 fighters fly by during a meeting in Olyaska. Interesting, what could this mean? Write your opinions in the comments. Following the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing, Ursula von der Leyen spoke about 3 main security guarantees for Ukraine. Powerful Ukrainian armed forces without restrictions on personnel numbers or weaponry. Support forces, which will also include the involvement of the United States. A strong and reliable European defense posture. Von der Leyen calls for increased investment in defense enterprises. The head of the European Commission also added that the EU will continue to impose restrictions against Russia in order to force Moscow to come to the negotiating table. Mark Rutte also showed his teeth. The NATO Secretary General, in his speech, commented on the statement by the Russian Foreign Ministry spokesperson Zakharova, who said that the presence of foreign troops in Ukraine would be unacceptable for Russia. Rutte emphasized that this is none of Russia's business.
Ukraine is a sovereign state. If Ukraine wants to have security guarantee forces in Ukraine to maintain peace, that's their decision. And I think we really need to stop making Putin too influential. Why do we care what Russia thinks about troops in Ukraine? Russia has nothing to do with it.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
Notably, Alexander Leonov, chairman of the board at the Center for Applied Political Studies Pentum, believes that this meeting was productive.
At the very least, Europe has reached some kind of framework for its vision of security guarantees for Ukraine. There are different levels of involvement from different countries. Some will even send military personnel, while others will help with weapons or money.
And finally, regarding Putin, the Russian president once again rejected the idea of serious negotiations with Ukraine. According to the Russian dictator, he is open to contacts with the Ukrainian side, but sees no point in it. After all, reaching an agreement will be impossible, particularly due to legal obstacles. He also added that if representatives of Ukraine want a meeting, it could be held in Moscow.
Why? Because from the Ukrainian side, reaching an agreement is practically impossible on key issues. Even if there were political will, which I doubt, there are legal and technical difficulties, namely that any agreements regarding territories must be confirmed in accordance with the Constitution of Ukraine, through referendums.
Putin invited Zelensky to Moscow for talks not to capitulate, emphasized Rotbunker's Dmitry Peskov. Putin promises to guarantee the safety of the Ukrainian side if they come to Moscow for negotiations. Zelensky's response was not long in coming.
Is that even necessary? We have supported meetings in any format, both trilateral and bilateral. I believe that Russia is doing everything to delay things. Our American partners told us that Putin invited me to Moscow. I think that if you want the meeting not to happen, you should invite me to Moscow.
Despite all of Trump's efforts in the peace talks, Putin is playing his own game. The front is ablaze. Missiles and drones are flying over Ukraine around the clock. And what the Americans are currently proposing in terms of territorial exchange to stop the war actually only benefits Moscow. Have the negotiations really reached a dead end, and what should we expect next? Find out in our report.
Ukraine is the shield of Europe. President Volodymyr Zelensky warns that any territorial concessions to Russia will not stop the war, but will only turn the captured regions into a launching pad for new attacks. The Kremlin has already used this strategy before, when Crimea became a springboard for pressure on the south, and part of the east was used for the full occupation of the region. If
Tomorrow, for some reason, we were to leave Donbas, which will not happen, we would expose an unprotected area to Putin right next to the city of Kharkiv, with its 1.5 million residents. He would also seize the industrial center of Dnipro. This would open up new opportunities for him.
the president of Ukraine urges Europeans to think on a larger scale. After all, if the Kremlin had managed to carry out its original plan to seize all of Ukraine, Moscow would have used it not only against Kyiv, but also against the West itself.
If Vladimir Putin had successfully managed to capture our entire country, he would undoubtedly have used it as a significant springboard for further aggression. Whether he ultimately succeeds or not will critically depend on precisely how strong and unified Europe truly is. If Europe demonstrates considerable strength and unwavering resolve, he probably won't attempt anything further, but if it appears weak or divided, it will inevitably suffer greatly from Russia's aggressive actions.
Zelensky also reminds us about geography. It's less than 3,000 kilometers from Moscow to Paris. And the range of Russian missiles already reaches 2,500 kilometers as of today. Ukraine is also developing long-range weapons with a range of up to 3,000 kilometers. And the arms race is only accelerating.
With such technological development, there can no longer be any distant wars. Believe me, in 2 years the Russians will have many missiles, and so will we, with a range of 5,000 kilometers. The sea won't protect anyone, the ocean won't protect anyone. In this regard, the weapons Russia is using today are not so different from nuclear means of delivery.
That is why the fate of Ukraine is not a local war but an issue for all of Europe. If Kyiv stands, the eastern border of Europe will remain the Donbas. If not, the front line will already run through Poland or Germany. Just as the Berlin Wall once divided the continent into two worlds. Against this backdrop of warnings, Zelensky also allows for a Korean scenario for Ukraine. Without a formal peace treaty but with a chance for prosperity and development, the only question is where exactly Europe is ready to draw its eastern border, in Donetsk or in Berlin. Meanwhile, new statements are being made across the ocean. US President Donald Trump, in an interview with CBC, admits that Kyiv and Moscow are not yet ready for a peace agreement. But he immediately adds a cryptic phrase that something is going to happen soon. He also announces that he will be speaking with the Russian leader in the coming days. I
think we'll sort everything out. Honestly, I thought that dealing with Russia would be easier than with some of the other conflicts I've stopped. But it seems this has turned out to be a bit more complicated than some of them.
For the American leader who not long ago called the war one of the easiest conflicts to resolve, these words sound like an admission. An admission that the Russian-Ukrainian war has turned out to be much more complicated than he expected.
It's clear that Trump will soon be pushing Putin for a trilateral meeting after all. After all, Putin is doing everything to show that he supposedly has no interest in direct talks with Ukrainian President Zelensky. I genuinely think that a trilateral meeting is a more realistic prospect, although, once again, holding it in the very short term still seems, to me, almost entirely like science fiction. Moreover, based on statements from Friedrich Merz, other European leaders, or Turkish President Erdogan, it's quite clear that right now it is Putin who is sabotaging the upcoming meeting. But the fact that he is sabotaging it now doesn't mean that Putin won't be forced to change his position in the near future.
But for now, the Russian dictator continues to spill blood on Ukrainian soil. European leaders are concerned about a possible new Russian offensive. Bloomberg reports that at a recent Security Council meeting, German and French officials discussed the buildup of Russian troops near Pokrovsk. Volodymyr Zelensky himself recently stated that around 100,000 soldiers are concentrated in this direction. The capture of Pokrovsk would open the way to Kramatorsk and Sloviansk, key cities for controlling the entire Donetsk region. What
kind of new offensive in the East are Western media writing about? I don't understand. Because there has been only one offensive, and it has been steadily ongoing for more than a year, with varying phases of Russian activity. These phases depend on losses and reserves.
Putin continues to pursue a strategy of dragging out the negotiation process. All of the various talking points and statements that he personally voiced directly at the extensive press conference held in China were clearly and unequivocally meant to somehow significantly dampen the enthusiastic spirit of the broad coalition of those nations and entities who are genuinely willing to come together to form a comprehensive and final proposal on the crucial security guarantees for Ukraine. Nevertheless, what we are currently seeing right now in the vibrant city of Paris is that absolutely no one is even remotely considering slowing down the entire process of these significant developments. It is precisely this crystallization of security guarantees for our state that shows that in principle we are making small but nonetheless real steps along the diplomatic track.
Today the choice lies not only before Ukraine but before the entire West. The decisions that will be made at future negotiations with Moscow will determine not only the fate of Ukraine, but also the security of all of Europe. Will peace be restored on Ukrainian soil, or will the war spread further? This is a question to which no one has an answer yet.
What do you think about the meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in Paris? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for more important updates, and don't forget to like for peaceful skies above us all.